My name is Rebecca Judd, and I serve as the library director for the city of Bellingham. And on behalf of the Bellingham Public Library and in honor of Native American Heritage Month, we welcome you to our program this evening. We are so glad you are here. Before we begin our journey tonight, I want to express my heartfelt gratitude to everyone here this evening, to filmmaker Althea Wilson, and to our panelists this evening, esteemed elder Wilma Olson, Cynthia Wilson, Dana Wilson, Troy Olson,
Lori Wilson.
and Lori Wilson. And I will introduce, and I'll catch Steve Lummi. And I also wish to thank the many individuals and organizations who helped create and support tonight's program: Julie Bowerman, Suzanne Carlson-Crandini, Annette Bagley, Bethany Hoagland, Katie Bray, Dr. Emma Norman, the Lummi Nation, Northwest Indian College, and the National Science Foundation. Watching the film prior to this evening's screening, I was reminded again and again that our stories matter. They connect us to our past, they help us understand our present, and they serve as a guide to the future. What I've begun to learn and understand throughout Thea's work is that the Nooksack River has held the stories of the Lummi people since time immemorial. And with that understanding, I wish to acknowledge that the river nourishes territory that has been, is now, and will always be ancestral Lactamish homeland. To Althea and the storytellers here tonight, everyone who welcomed me into their home, thank you. And to those who are present in the film but not here this evening, thank you for sharing the Nooksack River and part of yourselves with us so that we may grow in connection and understanding. Your stories matter. And for those here tonight who are inspired by the film and want to watch it again or share it with others, with Althea's permission, we are thrilled to announce that we have cataloged the film for the first time. And we've added the DVD to the library's collection, and it's already checked out, so you'll have to place a hold on it if you'd like to watch it. Althea, thank you for your generosity and for making your film so widely available to us. And now it is my great honor to introduce Steve Solomon, who will be sharing a welcoming song.
Good evening. Throughout the film, you're going to hear flood stories. And this song is survivors of the flood, and it carries throughout the whole Salish Sea. Oh, 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 hey. Oh, 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 hey. Shashash the Qualantansiam, and the catch on the whale. Sing the quank of Wio, Shashash the Qualantansiam. Oh, Wio, Wio, oh, Wio, Wio, Shashash the Qualantansiam. And the catch on the whale, sing the quank of Wio, Shashash the Qualantansiam. Oh, Wio, Wio, oh, Wio, Wio, Shashash the Qualantansiam. Catch on the whale, sing the quank of Wio, Shashash the Qualantansiam. Oh, Wio, Wio, oh, Wio, and the catch of the wheel, sing the quank of wheel, so judge the quality and
Thank you.
What do you think?
And now I'd like to turn it over to Suzanne Carlson Prandini, who will give us some housekeeping before our film this evening.
Thank you, Rebecca. Just a few housekeeping points for everybody. First, just know that some of the sound levels will vary throughout the presentation, especially during the film. So feel free to adjust the volume level through your own device settings. Closed captioning will be used throughout the event. Second, be aware, I see that many of you have found that the chat feature is enabled. And this is a great way for you to connect with other people participating, as well as connect with the staff if needed. For those of you who aren't as familiar with Zoom, the chat feature is that bubble at the bottom of your screen on larger screens. And if you're on a smaller screen, if you look at the three dots on the lower part of your screen and click on that, you'll see the chat option there. Third, we will invite questions during the panelist discussion using the Q&A feature. Q&A allows us to better track those incoming questions. So if you have a question for the panelists later on, make sure that you're looking at the Q&A option. It's the double speech bubble icon. And last, the Bellingham Public Library strives to maintain spaces that are open, welcoming, and safe. This is true of our physical and virtual spaces. So please keep courtesy in mind. Ask questions with kindness and respect, and think of others in this online space as your neighbor and friends. Should an individual struggle to participate in an appropriate manner, the attendee will be removed from the meeting. But that being said, I'm very much looking forward to seeing this film with everyone. We will hear from Althea and the panelists after the viewing. So let's get started with the movie.
Life was that river, and that river taught value, and it also taught people how to sustain themselves.
On days after a flood, we were told not to drink water from the taps. so we drank water from the river. On those days when someone came to the house in the morning, the first thing they looked at was the bucket of water. If the water was murky and muddy, they knew the water had just recently been dipped from the river. If the water was clear, they knew the water had been dipped from the river the night before. Regardless of whether the water was muddy or clear, everybody drank a cup of coffee before leaving our house. When someone mentioned the muddy water in the buckets down at the river, it still makes us laugh today. Once or twice a year, it was certain the river flowed over its banks. River water poured into our house as high as the windowsills. People watching the water rise in the river had a measure on the bridge up at Deming. It took 10 hours for the water to reach the mouth of the Nooksack River where we lived, so we had time to put the beds and other things up before the water came into the house. We had to put a net around the wood and nail the net to the house, or the wood would drift away. When we arrived in Bellingham, the Red Cross put everybody up in hotels. I will tell you about those flood days another time.
I can remember looking in the floor hole and then like a knot hole in the wood, and you could see the river swirling underneath there.
But we used to roll up our linoleum and put it on the floor. Made sure that we put our shoes on top of the dresser. I remember my dad, I want you to sleep with one foot on the floor tonight, son. You know, put your foot on the floor. How come? Put your foot on the floor. He says, when your foot gets wet, it's time for us to go. Yeah, it's time for us to go, because we used to have our boat tied to our doorknob when it was time, when it was flooding time. We used to have our boat tied to the doorknob. It's time for us to go. You know, little things like that, you know. Then when the water went back down, there was mud on the floor. We used to have a drill a hole on the floor like that, take the hose and wash out the floor and build a fire really hot in the house and dry out the house. And away we go again.
I just remember the floods. Sometimes we get flooded out and Red Cross would come and get us and bring us to the Savoy Motel in Bellingham, and at least there we'd get to go around and turn off the lights and stuff, because we didn't have any light switches down there. We just had one little light bulb with a string on it in the middle of the living room. That was the only light we had. Flush the toilet, that was kind of cool.
We used to live with outhouses, you know, we used to live with all the outhouses down there. At one time we had government outhouses. I mean, they were government, they had cement floor, they had the hole and they had the seat and they had the door and everything, but we had government built outhouses, and but that's the way we lived. And I used to have a little dog, and little black dog, and middle of the night I had to go to the bathroom, so my little dog would always go with me, because we had a plank, those big planks, and a walkway to the outhouse way out in the back there, and my little dog would go with me. And nothing but woods behind the house, and nobody else around in the middle of the night. And I went and I sat down in the outhouse, and pretty soon all I had was this kind of a lock. I mean, you know, just this kind of a lock, you know, and my little dog went back in the woods back there, and something actually kicked it. You could hear it kick it, and the dog yelped, you know. And I thought to myself, what could that be? You know, my little dog went running back in the house, you know, and now what am I going to do? This is not going to protect me, you know. This is not going to protect me, you know, so what am I going to do? So I sat there for a minute, and I thought, I better get in the house, you know. So I went bombing in the house, 90 miles an hour, just scared, you know. And you know, a very strong possibility it could have been Bigfoot during that time. because there were so many Bigfoot sightings down at the village during all the years of my life that there's been Bigfoot sightings down there. And I remember fishing down in the river down there, and you go down, drifting down the river, nice and calm. Pretty soon you could hear plunk. Go a little further, plunk, and go a long ways, plunk. Yeah, and something was following us down the river, you know, and I think I better go home now. You know, it's getting dark now. You know.
All the families that got to witness and experience those cycles down at the village. Those were the foundational village site for the Lummi people along the Stalo of the river.
Felt like home to us or something. I don't know. Every single day we walked from Gooseberry to the river, and we still tied up our boat in front of Grandpa's house and shaved our poles and got ready for fishing. We spent all of our time, seemed like it, at the river, even more than we did at our new home. Yeah, I think I can almost remember everybody at the river and some of the people that moved in, like after Marion Jefferson and Leonard moved. Haynes Julius and their family moved in there. And straight across from like Leona and Aunt Fran's house was the Warbuses straight across to the other side, and we used to holler back and forth to them.
Pretty much a fishing village is what it was down along the river. That's why everybody lived there, is because it was convenient for your boats and your nets. Everybody had all their gear along the river.
Like we moved there every fishing season.
I was born, as Larry would say, a poor Indian child on the Lummi Reservation. And we were poor. But Larry Kinley would always say that we didn't know it until somebody told us.
People said we're poor, we didn't know it, because we always had something. All Indian food too. Ducks, fish, smoked salmon, salt salmon. And I hear when I went to school, we had just plain sandwiches, that's what we ate. Fish sandwiches, White people made fun of us because we were still eating Indian food. We didn't know nothing about what they had, bologna or whatever,
When I lived down the river, it didn't seem like we were poor. I didn't even know what poor was until one little kid in Ferndale School District said, "You're poor." And so I came home and I asked my mom, I said, "What is poor?" And she said, "Who said that?" I said, "Oh, somebody said that we were poor." And she wouldn't answer me. And so I thought it must not be important.
But I have fond memories of Aunt Addie. She used to make the clam fritters, and she'd take the butter clams and she'd grind them and mix them with the eggs, and I was just a little boy, and I went over to her house, and she made clam fritters, and she put it between two pieces of bread. And I never had them like that before, between two pieces of bread, and like a patty and the bread, and I told her, I said, "Auntie," I said, "these are better than my mom's," which I shouldn't have said, but they were better than my mom's, because my mom's fritters always kind of fell apart, and hers all stuck together, these are better than my mom's. And apparently she told my mom, you know, and I heard about it, you know, for a while. So you think Auntie's fritters are better than mine? They were really good, you know, and but
And there was a smokehouse with full of hoogans in the wintertime, or we'd get sprouts, remember?
Yep.
We'd get sprouts. We'd go out there and eat sprouts.
On the weekends, yeah.
Yep, yep. We never went hungry.
And berries.
And
Yeah.
berries.
Salmon
Remember
berries.
the salmon berries? Yeah, we never went hungry.
And we used to go get sprouts all the time. We had fun looking for sprouts. We'd be walking, oh, I got more than you. No, I got more than you. Whatever. It was a challenge all the time for everybody to get sprouts. But that was, and we would go sit down by the water and eat our sprouts. I think our favorite pastime was when we would go fishing off of the bridge. And my friend from down Marietta, he made me a fishing pole, and we would go fish off of the bridge, and I would catch all the bullheads, and I'd make him take it off and throw it back in. But we did it all the time. That was our pastime. I gotta go home because Grandma would be standing down by the water, and it was time for me to go. So sometimes I'd dive in the water and just swim home because we could dive right off of the bridge. And by the time I dived like that, and when I would come up right near our house. None of us were. None of us were. We all dove off of that bridge. We knew it was too shallow on one side, and the other side was really, really deep, and we all knew how to dive, not to go straight down. We all knew how to dive there. But we did everything in that water, because there was parts for the little children and parts for the older ones, and it was just fun down there.
We would go over to Joe and Martha's house. That's up the road a little bit, and used to Indian dance for Joe, so that's where we'd go over and practice, and that was always kind of fun. Martha was pretty strict, but she didn't want you messing around when it was time to learn to listen to Joe and his songs and learning to dance. I thought that was always kind of fun. It was kind of a real community. I remember when a lot of the guys were at the big drift waiting for their drift, they'd have like a horseshoe pit there, and they'd be playing horseshoes and, and waiting for their turn to make their drift on the river. So there was always something going on there. It was kind of a interesting place to grow up. Seemed like there was always something to do down there. Climb around the nets or climb around the net racks and watch the older guys on their boats and working on boats or fishing. And old Matt Jones had a rain barrel there, and he had a pet seal in there, a little seal pup. We'd go up and play with that or watch that once in a while. Then I'd go down like on Saturday and Sunday mornings. All the kids used to race down to they called it the turnaround. They'd race down there and pick up the beer bottles, and we can go and trade those beer bottles in for candy down at Baker's store.
I think
So whoever got up earliest always got the most beer bottles and packed them through the trail and go down to Baker's store and turn them in for candy, and then, that was always, so there's always something to do.
Dad and I took Dad's boat to Baker's before.
Oh my God.
You did not.
We rode without just fine, but coming up we
Yep.
didn't with our candy.
Who was rowing? Because it was easy going
Both of
down.
us, we both had
Oh,
one.
yeah,
Yeah, one on one side, one on the
you
other
guys'
side.
arms would be too short.
Yeah. Luckily, Howard
Oh,
came
my
by
goodness.
and said, "What are you guys doing?" And he told us that he got his rope out and towed us upriver. Remember? We were thinking, "Oh, we're in so much trouble." He never told Dad.
Oh my God.
So we didn't get in
She
trouble.
remembers that part.
We went to the store, at Baker's.
How'd you guys even know how to do that?
I don't know.
Well, you could just drift down the river.
Yeah.
We were able to drift down the river and
Must have
park
been
and
Darlene's
tie
idea.
up. And tie
Getting
up.
back is one of the problems.
Yeah, going upriver.
We were hanging on to the branches because we were floating down, not up.
Oh my gosh, that's crazy.
The only story I remember is Mom was pregnant with me and she had to go to the hospital and she was supposed to get in the boat, the skiff, and the skiff got away, of course.
They used to have a phone, and we would call. This is what we did. We would take turns calling Baker's. She had a laughing machine. I'd go to the store. She would call Baker's, and he would run over and answer it. Then I could hear that machine laughing.
Wow.
Then I'd go out, and then she would go in, and then I would call over.
I remember it was still kind of a hot summer sunny day, and my sister Lori and Deborah were playing on a sandbar across. I don't know how they got over. They must have walked down the bridge, because you could climb down that bridge and get on the sandbar.
We're holding hands, and the sandbar was like this, and then pretty soon it went like that, and we just dropped straight down, and I remember seeing the grass going like that in the water, and it was really pretty and got real peaceful. And I quit screaming and everything, and pretty soon I remember somebody grabbing my hair and throwing me in a boat.
Deborah must have stepped in a little channel there, and she went over her head, and so she started drifting down, and we were Mom and Dad were on the other side of the bank, and I was over there with them, and I can remember Mom and Dad screaming.
We just happened to be going over the bridge, and I could hear them hollering for help, and Greg was with me on his car, so we went flying down to where he parked his boat.
And pretty soon there was a boat that come up and grabbed Deborah out of the water and pulled her in a boat. It was Connie Martin. If that boat didn't show up, Deborah probably would have drowned.
Harold Olson used to say, "Hey, I saved your life once." My mom said, "Yeah, you fell overboard and all that was sticking up was your yellow hair." And Harold reached over and grabbed me by the hair and pulled me out of the river. So, all the families around there were real close.
Wintertime, the river froze over, and it was about that thick of ice every winter. We would go skating with our socks on that ice. Bobby was the only one with skates.
We caught many sturgeon in our river. I mean, great big sturgeons in our river. And I used to watch those old guys butcher the sturgeon, and it's a real trick to butchering a sturgeon, how to bleed them. And but we were the fish buyers for many years, and I used to listen to my grandfather and my granduncle talk about how the Nooksack River was connected to the Fraser. At one time, the Nooksack was a tributary to the Fraser, And that's why we used to have so many sockeye go up our river and sturgeons go up our river because they had the scent of the Fraser, you see. And but then what happened was a farmer up there built a dam and blocked off that tributary. So that cut us off from that scent. So we don't have no more sockeye or sturgeons going up our river anymore. But I used to watch them at the big drift, how they would, everybody would take their turn to set their net. Everybody was respectful of each other and take their turn, when it come time. And everybody shared, and if you were lucky, you got it, and if you weren't, you weren't.
All the men in their skiffs used to get up and say, let's go clear the log jam. We didn't have an office or a business or anybody that did it for us. The guys got up and did it because they knew that this is our lifestyle and this is how we traveled, was through the waterways. And they would tie the logs to their boat, and then they would all take off and tow the logs out to let them adrift out into Bellingham Bay.
Every year to protect their salmon, they would blow the dams in the river. They knew also that they had to protect the stocks. So guess what they did? They closed the season. This is just within my lifetime. And because I used to go up by Loretta's and his mom's and his house, I would drive my skiff up there to go fishing. And so that was all clear enough to go through there, all the way down to Second Drag, all the way down to Sawdust, and then to go out to Third by Fish Point. It's all navigable at that time. So this is within the last 60, 70 years.
The appointed fisheries person and their stories of what it was like, tribal members they knew the seasons, they knew the cycles, and so they would target certain times where they would fish based on the demand. And then individuals would argue that they were illegal fishing without a license.
So we used to fish right out here in Bellingham Bay. And they had a boundary line, I think it runs from Point Francis to the Hoff Road, or they call Treaty Rock. From that big rock out on the other side of Lummi, Lies Island to the Red Canbuoy over by Fairhaven. And they used to have a boat called the Governor John R. Rogers. And they'd be patrolling there all the time, watching boats, make sure they didn't drift over. And for years and years they'd done that to us. And even when Jim, my brother Junior, was running a boat out there, I fished with him. And I can remember us just picking it up so fast, so it wouldn't drift, and everything was done by hand. And we'd pick up real fast in the ebb tide, make sure we didn't drift over that line, because that boat would be standing there watching us.
They used to give us a hard time, the Governor John R. Rogers, run that line all day long, running. They were that strict to us that they made that game warden run the line all day long. When I was young and raising my family and everything, I hated to miss a day of fishing. I just couldn't think of not being out there with the rest of the boys. You get that feeling, that you want to be out in the water. We had good fishermen, and we still do today. All Lummi boys are all good fishermen. I've done it from when I was big enough to row a boat too, so it's kind of natural for me, but I told them, you just can't jump in a boat and
go fishing. You gotta learn the waters, learn everything, you know, like, I don't even need a chart. I can just go sit any place I want. I don't know if I'm in a reef or in a shallow water.
I think I started fishing on my own when I was probably 12 years old. I think my dad had a boat down the river, and when he was working, after school he'd let me take it. So I'd fish after school once in a while, but I always been on the boat with him. He tells me stories about me being on a boat with him he says he always used to take diapers in a bottle, so he'd have to take care of me while we were fishing. That's the story he says. I don't know if it's true or not, but I hope so. It's kind of all I've done because it's what he's done. Probably the only thing I would do because I love it so much. And now my son's into it, and he's fishing off on his own. So, and I see that. And I don't know how, I'm 50-some years old. My dad's 85. You know, and when the wind blows, he calls me, "Are you all right?" You know, and that, I think that's pretty neat. But I'm probably going to do the same thing to my son when he's 50-some years old, and hopefully I'm 80-some. You know, and I wasn't the only one there. There was a lot of my cousins and stuff were down there, and you know, if somebody's in trouble out there, everything stops. And to make sure everybody's all right, and then go out back fishing again. So it's kind of neat that way. It's kind of it's like a big family. You know, fishing's doesn't seem like work. It's just a way of life.
My dad had been arrested so many times for fishing outside of the state regulations. They were going to put him in jail. From what I've been told, we didn't live in the main village on the river, but we lived on what my sister says is James Island, which is the island in between the main stem of the Nooksack and the branch that went over to Marietta. That island in the middle is where our house was. Like I say, we moved away when I was about 4. My dad had been arrested so many times for fishing outside of the state regulations that they were going to put him in prison the next time. So he packed us all up, and from talking to Henry Martin, he said, "Yeah, when you guys packed up and left, your dad sold us that house for $20. So the Martins lived there. So he packed us all up, moved us to Seattle. My mother's aunt, my great aunt Elsie, had a house in Queen Anne, and so they moved us in there, and my father left to go logging and fishing in Alaska, because that's what he knew. He knew how to log and he knew how to fish. He was a fisherman. And everybody that I talked to, the older folks that are mostly gone now, said he was a really good fisherman. So they survived on the river. They lived on the river. My oldest sister still won't eat fish because that's what they had for breakfast, lunch, and dinner was fish. They didn't have much else, and they were survivors. And so my uncle was telling me about my dad, that my mom and him were sitting in the car at the end of Hoff Road, which is above a Treaty Rock. That's where Treaty Rock is right below below the Hoff Road. They were sitting in their car watching my dad hang on to the end of his net in a storm, as the waves were breaking up onto the road and on their car. So if you go out out Marietta or out Hoff Road and sit there and look, you can't even get your feet wet, probably for another mile out there where the bay is now. So that's big changes in the whole river system there since those times. So, like I say, we moved to Seattle and lived in various different places there, but always came back home. My mom and dad would bring us up and stay with my aunts and my uncle, with Walt and Norb and George and Uncle Rennie, Lear, Randy and Ada. They lived in Marietta. Stayed up here with Joe and Velma and Joelle and Jewel and Doug and those guys for a few summers, and then I'd end up having to go back home, which was always hard, but developed those long relationships with my relatives. And so came up one year, was the driver for my Uncle Norm, and he wanted me to continue school, said make sure that I finished high school, and he'd make sure that I got to go to college. Well, about that time I met Linda, and that ended my desire to go to school. The long story short is I had the opportunity to go fishing for 2 weeks for herring, and came up, took vacation from my work, and the herring never showed up, and they never showed up. And I'm going, now what do we do? And thank Linda for saying, kind of emotional for me, that she was giving enough to say, go ahead, quit your job and go fishing.
What the government did with us, we still came back strong. But during that Relocation Act, I remember a lot of those people always came home during the fishing season to fish, to harvest, to do something with us. They always came back to Stomach celebration, and a huge majority of them all came back and did not go into the trades that the Relocation Act was training them for. They came right back and did what they were brought up to do.
Well, like when I was sent away to go on relocation, I went to Tacoma. What do they call them schools you go to learn how to weld and all that? What do they call?
Trade school.
Trade school, or something. That's where I went. My wife worked, and I went to school. And all my kids got down there, and we stayed there, and that's how I was building his house. And I'd go to school and work all week, and come home and work on the house, and that's all we did, go back and forth. And it wasn't that bad. It was, I think the kids didn't mind it.
These things were historical because the river did run a different way at one time, you know. And that needs to be identified because there was a way it identified itself. The tributaries, and you can see the effect because someone changed it. Because that river is alive. That's the whole problem people don't understand. And it kept people alive.
Respect yourself, respect others, and little love will go a long way. That's the end of my story.
Are we going all the way back there?
Yeah. Where the house is back there? Do you not want to walk back there?
Mm-mm. I mean, let's just keep going then.
Well,
Let's
maybe
just
try
get
it
it.
a little slower.
Like that?
Yeah, your instincts are good too, because most people would kind of go like this and move their whole body, but like, yeah, hold it close to your body and just turn like you're doing. It's perfect.
Like you're looking?
That's not what it looks like. Is that just...
What was that noise?
I think it was a bird, but there's a bird here or something.
Girl, we better go.
At some point when it's not as muddy, we should go to the other side and get, a shot across the river.
Did you hear that though? That was not a bird. It sounded like a door shut or something. You didn't hear it? I'm serious.
Do you think you heard it or something?
No. You didn't hear that thump? For real?
For real, I didn't. I mean, if I did, I just thought it was the sound of snapping of like branches and stuff. That's what I thought was birds.
Really?
I didn't hear anything. Did not hear anything that alarmed me.
morning and
The living
trying to
room.
get through the kitchen to the living room, trying to get through there, and we're all stuck in the doorway. Little Darlene says, yeah, and Mom wanted to go down there. See the Sasquatch. That was the first one to scream.
Well, it's not like today. There was no street lights. There was nothing like that down there.
So Mom would go fishing by herself. Yeah. She got stuck in a sandbar one time. Oh. And Joe Washington came and was trying to help her. She could hear something coming. She held her, what do you call that? Oar. Held her oar up, and she said, come on, you son of a bitch. And he got closer and closer, and she got scareder and scareder, and he says, are you okay, honey? Oh, she was just scared. Yeah, she got to go fishing by herself. So I never did get to see that.
No. I'm sorry to interrupt just momentarily. It's just been so wonderful to view the film together and to hear the stories, as you can see, that are already being shared. And it's my honor and privilege to be here, to be part of seeing this movie together. It's such a gift, and I have appreciated every time I've watched it. My name is Julie Maurman, and I'm a children's library specialist at the Bellingham Public Library, and I'm also a friend of Althea Wilson's. So it's an honor to introduce Tli'nuk'dzwidzi, Althea Wilson, as the filmmaker and presenter along with the panelists tonight. Getting to know Althea always means learning and laughing along the way. To be able to share experiences and listen well opens the path to greater understanding. She clearly shares that there is more than one way to think and be. Only Western and dominant thinking has taught us differently. I've watched the film a number of times, and it provides the opportunity to continue to deepen my respect and commitment to establish a reciprocal relationship to the lands and waters and the people of the Salish Sea from a place of learning. I learn each time from her attention to detail, from the life of the river, the connection to all of your lives, and to all of the elements of the film. I'm learning through our relationship that to hold and hold the history and the life of the river, and to transcend the history and the depth and breadth of the colonizer impact, we need to begin with the truth, the many truths of what it means to build reciprocal relationships with the caretakers of this land and these waters since time immemorial. Listening deeply to the words and the space between the words, I take seriously Althea's stance to grow this understanding. And it's an honor to do this, to listen deeply and to listen long. The opportunities are numerous. Althea has hosted many cross-cultural events and projects in our community, and it's been a privilege to be a part of them and a privilege to be here with all of you tonight and to introduce Althea.
Thank you, Julie. And thank you, everyone. And thank you to the Bellingham Library for honoring us and giving us the opportunity to share just a little bit of insight to our Lummi culture and who we are as Indigenous people on this land. I don't want to take up too much time, but I do want to thank my panel for coming and sharing this time with us for Native American Heritage Month in respect and honor of our elder and our matriarch, Wilma Olson. We'll let her share some thoughts first, and then the panelists will take her lead on that. So we thank you all again. We thank you all for coming into the webinar and sharing this time with us. We thank the Bellingham Library and the Northwest Indian College and the National Science Foundation. And so I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to my Auntie Wilma Olson.
Our Auntie.
I grew up with my sister and I in our grandparents' home. We lived up in Quina Road. She had a home there.
And fishing season, we'd move down the river, because my grandfather was a fisherman. So that was like a vacation for us to get away from in the woods. And to get with other people. And it seemed like we were like one big family. Everybody seemed to get along real good. And it was a good time to be down there. But later on, when I grew up, I married my husband, and his parents lived down the river there. And so we moved down there too. He's fisherman also. Every year it would flood. And the Red Cross would come in, and we'd get to go to town to spend the time there at the hotel or motel. And I don't know.
Well, it seemed like your house was standing on stilts.
Oh,
Your
yeah.
house was up above the
It was
water.
a little bit higher.
A little bit higher than the rest of our houses.
Grandpa Herman's house? Or which one?
Yeah, Grandpa Herman's house was there, and then your house was next door. What's it?
Howard.
Howard.
Oh,
I think they were
yeah.
both on still.
That's
Yeah.
And we later moved down to my husband's where he lives.
Yeah.
How many children did you have down there?
4.
What?
Mary, Loretta,
Johnny.
Johnny,
Russ?
5.
Yeah. Raised. They were raised down there.
Oh, yeah.
Didn't Loretta and Dottie stay down there after you guys moved?
Yeah.
That didn't last very long, did it?
No,
They got hungry.
She's still staying with me now.
Yeah, we was talking about not being scared down there. It was never a scary time. It was always a good time. Our families always got together. I remember being at your house a lot. Auntie Rena Blue's house a lot, and walking past the bachelor pad. Everybody helped everybody.
I remember one time, Auntie, we were at your house, and we were all sitting in the living room. You know how your kitchen was in the back? You could see everybody from that door you were talking about. Uncle Ray was standing there, and I don't know if he was paying attention to anything. He was standing there, he was going like this. And I was thinking, what is he doing? I'm just little. He was counting the heads to see how many potatoes he was gonna cook. And I didn't know that then, but I told that story to Dad, and he goes, that's what he said. Dad goes, he was counting the head to see how many potatoes he was gonna cook. And Dad just said it naturally, you know. Yeah.
I think the families that live down there are still really close.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, Auntie Wilma, you're not even blood to us, but you couldn't tell us that. Geez, almost that gave me the chills. Yeah, and when I see Johnny, your brother, Loretta and Darlene, just like that. Yeah. Troy.
I was really young. I remember we were in West Seattle for the relocation program. Living, I think, at West Seattle, And I remember I was 4 years old there, but then we went back home. And I don't know exactly what year we went down to the village, but I must have been 6, 7. That would have been 1967, maybe. That we all lived down at the end down there. And to me, I was small. So it was a dark place there. Just because there was no lights, right? Maybe a porch light at everyone's home, or a porch light to the outhouse.
Yeah.
That's about it.
Yeah, the only time we went out after dark was the outhouse.
Well, you're lucky you had a light today.
I don't remember no lights. I don't remember no lights.
I'm just saying, all the houses along the way, some of them would have a light to the outhouse, but not everyone. So I think we stayed there until maybe, I don't know exactly what time we moved out of there. 72, I think FEMA had some trailers and they built Coyote Loop. 1972, they did the trailer park. And then 1973 was the self-help at Kinley Way. Right. So then it had to be, what was it called? You had to do 800 hours for equity for building the houses on Kinley Way. What was that called?
Yeah, that was
self-help. Self-help, yeah.
That's how you built your house.
Yeah.
So then in 1972 or 73, we moved to Kinley Way.
That's one. One in between.
Yeah, that's what I can remember.
It's pretty, yeah.
We have a couple of questions from people who are viewing. Did you guys want to hear the questions?
Sure.
So Catherine Willis wants to know, was the Stallo Village on the east side of the river, south of the bridge near Marietta? So what's the location of the village site?
Right below the bridge.
Off of Marine Drive?
Yeah.
It would be the eastern bank of the island of Chachuzen today. There was always a dispute with the settlers on where the Lummi's boundary was, and they always claimed it was the eastern bank of the Nooksack River. If you look in the historical notes.
You cut Baker's store in half.
Well, I think to her question is that it was on the eastern side of the river.
Yeah.
Below Marine Drive. Plus there was a village on the other side of the river too. So there was villages, there was homes on both the east side and the west side of the river. So
But in the olden days, if you look at Marietta Channel, it would have been Silver Lake. That still would have been a part of the Nooksack River. So it would be right there by Marietta.
McNeil Island?
James Island.
James Island?
But the village was on both sides.
Yeah.
People lived on both sides.
I don't know that, I know there's a traditional name, but I'm not familiar with the pronunciation. The village. Are you?
Oh, the actual village?
They have a name. It's a traditional place.
Alum.
Alum.
Home. Alum is home. Stallo is the river. Alum is home.
Fork of the river.
Is there another question, Julie?
There is. Janice Olson.
Was Suzanne going to ask the question?
Yeah, so Janice Olson was wondering, when did the river stop
You are
freezing
muted. You're muted, Annette.
in the winter? So the question from
I
Janet.
can't hear Suzanne. No.
Let's see. I'm gonna drop the. I'll repeat the question. Janice Olson was wondering, when did the river stop freezing in the winter?
Mm-hmm.
Does anybody have an exact count of families?
There's a map that Ernestine put together and Bev Katie put a real map together. They just drew houses and stuff like that. I thought up there had it on her video. But
I did remember seeing that.
yeah,
Okay.
that was a fun one. Ernestine made it.
So the next question was, when did the river stop freezing in the winter?
Oh, climate change.
The last time it froze?
Yeah.
I'd say like the 80s.
Mid-80s.
Yeah.
Last time it ever froze.
Yeah, because we remember seeing it, you know,
Yeah.
when we'd go over it. And
Right.
Yeah. Yeah, about 80s, mid-80s.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah, there was snow when we would go to toward the church, you know, from down the river. The snowplow would go by, you know, to clear the road. I don't remember seeing that, but you know, sitting in the car, the snow drift would be up there, higher than the car.
Mhm.
Yeah.
In the 80s.
No, in the late 60s.
Oh,
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah, not even the 70s. Yeah,
Yeah.
late 60s. Yeah.
Oh, I wasn't born then.
So cold.
How come we didn't freeze?
Yeah, I don't remember freezing. I don't remember being cold.
Well, everybody knitted wool socks.
Yeah, we had wool socks. We did.
Our popsicles, we just went and picked them off the
Off
eave of the
off the
house.
roof. That was, remember, Dana?
What's that?
We'd get our popsicles off the roof of the house.
You used to watch them grow.
Oh, yeah.
Well, you gotta remember those houses down there, those, I don't know, if they're houses and shacks or whatever, but there was no insulation in them.
No.
None.
Mm-mm.
So.
In some parts
No
of the house,
insulation.
some parts of the house I could see outside.
Oh, yeah,
Outside
yeah,
the
yeah,
hot paper.
yeah.
They were just hot paper shacks.
Yeah.
We couldn't survive that today.
Well, after the river would break up, then everything was muddy.
Cleanup, spring, real
Muddy,
spring cleanup.
There was a lot of mud. And this was a way of life, right? Life went on.
But you know what amazes me when I think back is that our houses were so clean. I don't remember no mud on the
Oh, I
floors.
know.
There was no mud on the floors. I don't remember no garbage around our house ever. There was no old cars laying around. There was nothing. There was one over there dead. Somebody fix that.
I never did understand the fire truck. Was that a fire department?
They put one there.
Or was
but I
it
don't
a
think the fire truck
volunteer?
ever worked. They just gave the playground.
Yeah, it was just my playground.
Played in it, yeah.
Well, they had it locked up and she killed get in there. I mean, was it a district?
Must have been.
Did you ever use that hose to hose out the house after the flood emptied? The fire truck hose? Mom claimed she did. Yeah.
Maybe that's all the fire truck was doing.
Hose the houses out,
Yeah.
open the door
Did
and.
she really say that?
That's what she said.
Yeah. How would you get the hose down there?
No. Well, there had to be a lot of mud from that river in that one in the house because everybody lifted everything up and then.
Well, there was some big floods.
Yeah.
There was a lot of big floods.
Auntie members getting new linoleum every year.
Every year.
Yeah.
So Lori mentioned the foods, the different foods that everyone ate prior to moving away from the river. And one of the questions was, what is the sprouts that you referred to? What are those?
Yeah.
The baby trees.
They were like, they were young salmon berries.
Yeah.
sprouts.
Salmonberry.
Or blackberry too.
They would relate to them as shoots coming off the
Right.
salmonberry bushes.
And, you know, they're
Tender shoots.
They're nice
They were
and
really
sweet.
nice.
They were sweet.
It was the first fresh vegetable
Yeah.
of
Yeah,
the spring.
yeah.
You have a whole armload.
Coming out of the woods. But
You get
Yeah.
the sprouts first and then the berries come later.
Yeah.
I know when we moved to Seattle, Marlene and Loretta, they'd go get sprouts and the kids were wondering what they were doing.
Blackberry sprouts.
Salmonberry ones, salmonberry
They'd
ones.
have a whole big armload sitting down on the street there somewhere.
Yeah, I point them out to my grandkids today, early spring.
Did your dad relocate to Seattle too?
Tacoma.
Oh, Tacoma.
Well, this brings up a good question from Camille. She asks, what was the relocation policy that has been referred to several times in the video and follow-up stories? What was the relocation policy?
I don't know what the policy was, but it was a way to
It
get
was a
the,
map, wasn't it?
yeah, it was a way to get the Indians off the reservation and quit having them be fishermen so they can go get a new trade.
Yeah.
And not come back to the reservation. But the Indian people being like the salmon, always return home.
They all came back.
All came
Oh,
back,
heck, yeah.
educated fishermen.
What do you remember about the relocation program? What were you guys told?
We just had to move down there and get rain training. We had about 4 or 5 different things he could have chose from. One was cooking. I told him, you don't like to be in the house. I said, you need to be outside somewhere and working. He chose carpentry.
My dad chose welding and auto mechanics. He claimed to be doctor of motors. But he could hear a car go by down on the res and he knew what was the matter with it. He said, oh, that guy's got to fix his. He welded some stuff for us too.
I was too young to even understand what my dad was being trained for. And I don't know if it's mechanics or if it was aircraft mechanic.
Wow.
Wow. Uncle Junior, what did Uncle Junior go to school for?
I remember.
Auntie, what do you remember about how was it inviting for you to grab your family and move? What was inviting?
It was hard.
Yeah, I guess it was kind of hard. Because it was nice. And
Nice government housing, that was for sure.
First time we seen it. It was the first time we seen a light
Back to
switch.
the question of
It was the first time we seen
relocation
a light switch.
it's federal Indian policy at that time. There's all kinds of federal Indian policies that looked at termination, looked at relocation, and it's a phrase in the back of our minds, us older ones, is it gets back to treaty times and the federal Indian policy then, it was in the federal government's level was to kill the Indian to save the man. You know, and the Columbia River is our witness. And you could look at the Columbia River and see what the federal government did to that river. Since the Columbia River is one of our witnesses, as long as the river flows, the Columbia River was our main witness. As long as that Columbia River flowed, all the mountains still stand. That sun rises from the east and sets in the west, and the grass still turns green. All of those four witnesses are still alive. And what we as the human population continues to do is we're suffering it now. Global warming and this ever-changing climate change, it's all tied together and on the health of all of those resources. The water's telling on us. Water shortage, water quality, air quality, all of these are in our mind, in the way we live, everything's connected. We don't think linear. We don't think it's got an end. We think everything is a sphere shape, and we're only as strong as our weakest link. And Mother Nature's given us signs. We've seen our natural resource fish population go down, and ESA policy is a good one. That's the federal policy. Still, the federal Indian policy is to ride that to zero. And when they ride that resource to zero, it takes us as a tribal nation, as fishermen, out of their equation for something bigger. You know, that's my fear. You know, and I'm not for riding a resource to zero. Is why we're so compassionate, and it compels us to do something for the fish. That's just one example of what we're doing here at home, here at Lummi.
You know, one thing that I remember Dad saying, which I was going to bring up, was because I was asking Auntie Wilma what she thought about the relocation. But when I asked Dad, I said, what did we do that for? Because it was a big deal. We moved it, packed up, and the U-Haul had a U-Haul with everything that we owned behind it. And what he basically said was, no, this is exactly what he said. He said that the federal government, if they figured that they would move the Indians off the reservation, eventually the reservations would be terminated because there was. So yeah, it was a plan. It wasn't, yeah.
Termination there.
Yeah.
Well, we would
And
come
we
home
didn't
every,
accept termination.
we came home every weekend because he was building his house.
Well, I look forward to that.
Yeah. That was a long ride.
Yeah.
Any more
Something
thoughts?
like that.
Any more thoughts?
And when we seen Bellingham,
Any more thoughts?
Well, I have one. I just want to just talk about today, we're years later down the road. And if I was to open my eyes when I was down in the river and have an opinion, that was the salmon people. The people who lived amongst and was part of the salmon, and the salmon was part of them. And we're still the salmon people. That's all we know. Is that we're salmon people.
You know, and that's the way it was, is that's why there was no hungry. Nobody went hungry down there, because you needed something. You went and caught some fish, and you made a little bit of money, and and you didn't overfish things. There were seasons, and and everybody just didn't fish. They fished as they needed things. That was like their bank, or their bank account. they needed something, they'd go make a couple of drifts, make enough money to go to town or do whatever, get fuel for their car and park the boat. Next day, if they needed to make some more money, they'd go, you know, that's why Troy says it was the salmon, because that's what we depended on down there. It was the salmon. That's why we were there, because of the salmon. And everybody flourished. We weren't rich, but we survived.
It was a good life down there.
It was a great
I'll
life.
always hold that dearly. The lifestyle, like you said, it wasn't messy. The homes were clean and they were well kept. The houses were warm. The food, there was always food.
You know, I remember going over to my dad's aunt, we'd walk over there and, you know, I still remember it still as a kid, just going in and it smelled like baked bread, you know.
Oh, yeah.
Every home had to. It was
Seems
a
like
healthy.
there was always lard on the table to dip your smoky fish in.
That or bacon grease.
Yeah.
50-pound bags of tails.
Yeah. Yeah.
It was,
Never see that hardly anymore. 50 pounds. You'd have 50
No.
pounds.
50-pound bags of tails.
Yeah.
You know, and those men, they, you know, they built their own boats, they built their own homes, they built, you know, they built everything themselves to survive. So it wasn't a handout place. It was a place where people provided for themselves.
Well sustained. They maintained their nets tight. It was part of them. Yeah, net racks. And they would mend them and oh my, it was just like their space was all organized.
Yeah.
It wasn't messy, it wasn't neglected, it was appreciated.
There was a lot of people that when they condemned that place, and the tribe condemned it and moved them up to Coyote Loop, some of those old men wouldn't leave. You know, they were reluctant to leave. They wouldn't leave. You know, I think that Bob Jefferson was the last one to stay there.
Grandpa
Herman, and you know, they weren't going to leave that lifestyle.
No, they didn't want. They were happy. That was their home. And if they didn't have a choice, or if there, I think there was leverage for them to move. But if they had their choice, they would have lived it.
You know, that was their life. Is that everybody, when they needed something, they jumped in that boat. If they had to go down to the store, that's what they used to go to the store with that boat. They, you know, the boats were tied right there in front of their homes, and everything was available. Everything was available from that river. So that, you know, that river, the river gave them life, and that's what they appreciate.
One thing that's not talked about is there were also saltwater people that would jig a lot of cod, and they would collect seagull eggs and different types of foods. Just a little ways out into the saltwater for them, right?
Yeah.
So I know that they ate a lot of white codfish. Hooligans, crab, oysters. If the tide was out, the grunters, bags and bags of clams.
Yeah.
A lot of clams when the tide was out.
Yeah. Yeah.
I went down there not too long ago. And I took a picture of myself in front of the tree that was in the house, by the house. That tree was huge.
Really?
Yeah.
Was it in the middle of the road?
Yeah, it was in the middle of the road. Kind of made me kind of sad because I brought my grandkids down there. I said, this tree used to be really little when I was down there. So.
Even taking a ride down the Marietta Channel today. If a young person went through that channel down to Marietta, they have no recollection or any memory of what it was, what that lifestyle was just not long ago.
Right.
Yeah, I brought them to the elementary school that I went to in Tacoma.
Yeah.
I said, when we got relocated, this is the school I went to. And that made me kind of teary-eyed too. So the houses that we lived in when we lived in Tacoma, they're all gone now. It's no more housing project. It's kind of like condos now.
Can't even recognize.
Yeah, there's one house there that looks similar, but East 41st Street, next to Piggly Wiggly.
So
Where Dana worked at.
I wanted to say that we're gonna have to come to a close for time. And I do have some Haishkas. I want to thank you all for coming in and joining in the panel and discussion. Indigenous knowledge is as old as time. Since time immemorial is what our elders say, since time immemorial. Since time immemorial, we have been here. And there have been so many changes and so many things that have impacted the lifestyles of Indigenous people, not just here in the Pacific Northwest or here in the Lummi Nation, but everywhere in the United States. And so this is just a very small part of what we call our unceded land or our homelands. And I, as a filmmaker, I have made more films. Most of them are specifically for the work that was asked to do for specific cultural events. We had one with the Whatcom Creek. We had one with the STI. We had one with the educational program, the Bellingham PUD. And so there's much work to be done in this particular area of Indigenous knowledge and understanding. And it seems to be for all of us who are on the outside looking in, that there are more questions than answers when we begin. But I believe over time, because of the dedication and the commitment and the conviction of the people who live in the Lummi community and other Pacific Northwest Indian communities, we will rise to the occasion as we always have. And so I believe in my heart that the work is going to continue, and it continues in a really good way. And we are not, we've only just begun, I think. And so I'm really grateful for that. I'm grateful to the Bellingham Library for collaborating, putting the video in the library. It now becomes, a learning and a lesson for people ongoing in futures to come. And so I'm really excited about that. I want to also say every child matters. And I want to remember the missing and murdered Indigenous women. She will never be forgotten. And so I do have some, thank you, cousin. I do have some Haishkas. And this one's for Auntie Wilma. I want to thank you, Auntie Wilma, for coming and helping us understand just a little bit more. Thank you, Auntie.
Four socks.
They make
My
a
grandson's
difference.
gonna love those.
Which one?
The older one.
You got pick.
Haishka.
Oh my gosh.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Haishka soup. And so that's just a little Haishka, just to say, Haishka, thank you for your time. Thank you for spending this in a sacred way with us. And once again, I think I'm going to turn it over to the library.
Yes.
Haishka, yeah.
And we wanted to present you, Althea, with get this from.
Thank you.
Thank you for honoring everyone here, for honoring us with your time and your stories, and for all you do for our community. It's so appreciated. And thank you to everyone in our audience who joined us here this evening. We so appreciate you spending this time with us. We hope you have a wonderful rest of your evening. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Steve, take us away with the
Take us
song.
forward, just in case.